I still drive, I will admit this, I still drive to our old office 100% of the time I'm here. Which means I'm not in here enough. So I'm here today. I love to be here and good to see you all. We're going to talk about this NAR settlement that is all the talk of so many entities. Mostly right now it's with agents because it's kind of died down in the news and some of the fuss has died down. So we get into kind of some of the nuts and bolts as far as what that is. But I want to just specify a couple of things. One, this is so figure outable. So I want everybody to just really understand that no matter how much of a fuss it seems like it's been, this is so easily figure outable. So just give us a little bit of time and we'll have new spaces and places for all these things. They're just going to shift around a little bit. So the NAR settlement had to do with two things. One of them was our agreements with buyers and how those will work. And then one of them is our offers of compensation, our co-ops, what you guys see in the MLS, and where those will live. And those are really the two things that this whole settlement has to do with and how they'll affect us. So our contracts part of it, we are going to have new contracts. They just went from the editing committee to the commission yesterday. So the commission now has to give them a final approval, and I should have red line contracts next week. And then I will be taking a red line class. May invite some of our leadership to do that with me. And then we'll have new contracts coming the beginning of August. And while that, we've had some big changes that are litigation or legislature rather, that has caused us to have new contracts. This is not because of legislature. This is so our contracts are in compliance with this NAR settlement. So most of it just has to do with commissions and changing up words, and it's not a major change. We'll go through some of it in basic form, but we'll do a deep dive once we have those contracts. The second part is, and I guess more that to say is everything that is the technical parts of this that are the nuances of the settlement. That's why we're getting new contracts, and so that's taken care of for you. So when you're like every offer of compensation has to have, and we'll go through some of those details, not to worry. These new contracts will actually have that written in for you so that they're compliant. Okay. And the second thing is the offer of compensation. This buyer's agency or transaction brokerage co-op, which is offered typically in MLS until now, is moving. That field in MLS is going away. And so we are going to have to find a new landing space for that. But it's not that the buyer agency co-op is going away. So I wanted to use an example before we get into it. I have permission to do this. We had a big case that came up at arbitration that we finished a couple of weeks ago about an offer of compensation. And that offer of compensation was on a transaction that never was in the MLS. And so the question is, oh, we always have offers for compensation that happen. They're so oftentimes even currently not in the MLS. So this was actually through text message, and that was a legal binding co-op, much to another brokerage's dismay, that was a legal binding offer of compensation. So what you guys need to remember is offers of compensation have to be in writing. And while we love for them to live in these documents, and we're going to give them documents for it to make it easy for you, they actually happen all the time outside of these documents. They're just going to come down hard. We have this done in the right way. So let's get into some of it, and I'm happy to take questions also. I have to read this though. So NAR settlement will take effect August 17th, 2024 this year. So that means we will have new contracts before then. So somewhere in between now and then, I'd say probably the end of July, the first week of August, we're going to have these changes to the contracts. And then we are required to be in compliance with all of this by August 17th. Also, important to note, this is a Board of Realtors, National Association of Realtors change. This is not a law change. So it's important to differentiate the two. This is we have two entities that govern us, and one is the Colorado state law and the federal law, and then one is this National Association of Realtors, which some of us belong to, some of us don't. We're all supposed to, but just remember who the governing body is, and so it's not a legal change. Agents working with buyers are now required to enter into a written agreement prior to showing any home, whether in person or virtually. Okay, so you are going to have a buyer's agency agreement. We're actually going to be updating our brokerage disclosure to buyer also, so that we can put a compensation amount in there. But that has to be in writing before you ever show a home.
Is that Colorado law?
That is not Colorado law.
That's NAR rules.
I would love to assume, because our office is, we are required to belong to a board. We're gonna do most of these rules according to what the NAR rule is. If you have to have a workaround, there's a dire need for a workaround. Call me and in a non-recorded type meeting.
Smoke signal.
No, I'm not here to teach you how to get around the rules. I'm here to teach you how to the rules, follow the rules and be in complete compliance. So you have to remember that. So we're not going and doing showings, finding a house that you like, and then going, I know, I'm like trying to avoid the
Yes,
camera.
stay on camera.
I'm trying to avoid the camera. We're not going and doing showings, finding house, going to write an offer, and then sending out over all this paperwork at the end. That's not going to happen anymore. And guess what? Good. Y'all shouldn't be doing that anyways. I know that that's the way that a lot of us are doing it, but this is going to require us to say, hey, we're doing the work in advance before we take our buyers out to let you know that we don't work for free. And here's how I get paid. And it's fair that these buyers and sellers understand truly how we get paid. So it's kind of bringing things to the surface, right?
Whitney, did we ever find out who we turn those into or who is checking on those documents for
I
us?
don't believe, the question is, do we have to turn them into somebody or somebody going to be checking them? I don't believe so. I believe it will be just like how our agency agreements live right now. They live in a folder for compliance. They should live in your compliance folder personally as well. And if called on, we will need to produce them. If subpoenaed, we will need to produce them. But we probably won't need to show them before we go to showings. There may be some listing agents that require that. I don't know why they would, but that might happen. Do you have a question?
No, so in case you get audited, you can at least.
Definitely, yep. So this agreement that we have in place with our buyer must conspicuously disclose the amount of compensation the buyer's agent will receive and how this amount will be determined, whether it's a percentage, a flat fee, an hourly rate, or retainer fees. And we have that already in our buyer's agency agreements. That already is what that says. So this is saying, hey, we're going to be paid this amount, and we've said that up front. And then we're going to say, who pays that? Guess what? Our buyer's agency agreement already says that as well. It already says we'll be paid by the buyer, we'll be paid by the seller, we'll be paid by the listing brokerage. Those are our options. So it already says that. So it just puts it in a new light. The amount of compensation may not be open-ended. So you may not have a buyer's agency agreement that says buyer's agent will accept any offered compensation that seller or listing brokerage offers. That is not going to be sufficient. It has to have a number. The amount of compensation, oh, I got that, must include a statement that states that the agent may not receive any amount of compensation that's higher than the agreed upon amount. Agents, you're going to have to decide how much you want to work for. And if you say, I work for, and we're not going to say percentages, X amount, then that's fair for you to say. But you're going to have a decision that says, this is how much I work for. It's not that there is no workaround. If we have a number that's changed in this offer or in this deal, it's not that we don't have a way to change that. That would be by an amend extend with your buyer's agency agreement, but you have to have a number, okay?
Hey, Whitney, I have a question.
Yes.
So I know the answer to this, but I think it's important for the room. Somebody that was trained at a different brokerage that joined us recently sent me a buyer agency to check, and it had a range.
Mhm.
And we don't teach that because you don't put a range. And I remember our lawyer specifically saying that we shouldn't. So they need to put
It's a
the
number.
exact amount, right?
number.
2.5, 2.8, 2.0, whatever the heck the number is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a number.
Percentage number.
Yeah, not no less than or up to, it doesn't have to be a percentage. It can be a flat fee. It can be hourly rate. It can be a retainer fee. Those are kind of the formats that it can be in. We typically see it as a percentage. But that's not, the whole point of this is that typically is not how the word we're using for anything anymore. That's the whole NAR settlement, right? Is that there's no price fixing. Everything is negotiable and it's according to the terms of what you and your buyer decide for you guys. Must include a statement. Okay, we got that one. There are a few other technical provisions here. So like I said, there are many other little technicalities. Those are going to be written into the contract, like must disclose every office is independently owned and operated, must disclose all these little nuances that you guys don't need to have to write in. We'll make sure that those contracts will say them for you in the pre-printed portion, right? Agents will need to understand also all different types of buyer representation. We have buyer's agency, we have transaction broker, and we're going to have different types of ideas like shorter term representation. How about for a day or for an address or for a week or for a zip code or for a month, or usually we're doing it for a client, but we may need to do that client for this day or this client for this house. Does that make sense? Because they may not want to say, hey, I don't know you all that well yet. I would like to go see this house. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, I cannot show you this house until we have an agreement. I want to show you this to you too. We're going to have some scripting surrounding, can I have a shot to show you this house? And I'll learn your business. And hopefully then we can get into a longer term buyer's agency agreement or a different type. But you're really going to need to understand, because I think for the first time, we're really going to have to explain these things to our buyers with a higher level of proficiency. So you really need to understand the different forms of buyer's agency agreement. Next up. Okay. Consider the ways of compensation. Retainer fees may be in addition to, separate from, credited against, offered compensation, or even refundable. So if you have a different way of looking at something of saying, hey, my buyer's agent is gonna, my buyer is going to offer me a retainer, more like an attorney style, saying this is how we're going to go forward. If we find a house and they offer compensation, I will rebate that against that offer of compensation. There may be different ways that you have to teach and look at how we will look at these buyer agency agreements and the percentages that or flat fees, how we perceive this compensation. Make sure to be able to clearly explain to your buyers how compensation will work. We don't want to have to mediate or arbitrate for the love with our own clients to get paid. Not good for referral business and online reviews. And what I mean by this is that you need to be able to clearly state to your buyer, especially in this nature of this time right now, where we have someone on the news saying, you can get more money out of your buyer's agent, or you could just sue them and be a part of this. We've had several people call and say, you know, can I participate in this lawsuit? You need to be able to fully articulate what kind of agency agreement that you're in and what the conditions in terms of it, what your jobs are within it, and what they can expect, and then how you will be paid. The definitions of working relationships is a really good form that is available as an explanation. And we used to use it all the time. It's just a notice. It's not a disclosure. But it's a good way to say, here's what these different forms of representation mean to you as a buyer. So that could be a tool for you to use as well. New forms to be released in Redline format next week will be mandatory use by the August 17th deadline. I will be getting them next week. I'm taking this Redline class right after that. You guys are all welcome to, you're going to have many opportunities to sit in and learn about these. I will be bringing a Redline class to our office specifically from Damien. And you're welcome to take mine. You're welcome to take one anywhere. We'll make sure that you've got the information here. I do have a few of the contracts that we received from Damien just in the overview meeting a few weeks ago. And this is before they even went to the editing committee. So I can't say this is what they're going to look like. In fact, I know it's not what they're going to look like, but it'll give you a little bit of a brief overview of what the changes will be so that you can understand. Can we pull those up?
Yeah.
Any questions while we pull those up?
How does this work with an open house? And you know, you're having an open house, unrepresented buyers walk in the door. I mean, are you technically showing them the house? Do you need an agency agreement with those buyers that walked in off the street?
So what I would do for open houses, and I already recommended this, I recommend that everybody takes your brokerage disclosure to buyer and get it laminated and put it on the counter at your open houses. Take a picture of it in the house that you have open. So you've got documentation right there. Mark customer on that, because anyone who walks in is going to be a customer until you have an agency relationship with them. So that's how I was just talking. I think it was Deborah yesterday on the phone about this. So that is a way for you to kind of go around that. Honestly, you should be doing that anyways. It's like, I represent the seller. Don't come in and say, I just got an inheritance. I have so much money to spend. Show me this house. Hey, you need to know you're a customer right now. And I actually will use that information against you on my listing to get more money from my seller. It's the same reason we should always be saying, before you give me a bunch of personal information, please understand who I represent here. So it's a great form anyways. So that's what I would use.
What if you're not the listing agent though?
It's okay. You can still, I still would have it sitting there just to let them know they're a customer. If they say, could you go show me this house down the street? You may have to have a different conversation, but that brokerage disclosure to buyer now will have a compensation amount listed in there now where it didn't before. So, yes, sir.
Do we need a new buyer agency on 817 with somebody who's already got one signed?
Brett, do you know the answer to this?
Of course I do. What did you select? We just had this conversation. That's why we're so arrogant about the
I
check.
explained the whole thing about what's happening.
Did you choose that buyer may pay or buyer must pay?
Buyer must pay.
Then you did it correctly and you'll get paid.
And that's what I've done for my whole career.
Me too. And that is the correct way to do it. It's actually the way we train it in PC coaching for what would have previously been the unlikely event, you don't get co-op compensation.
If you have the other one marked, I think you just need to go in and re-explain to your buyers in the event here that this is not what's offered, you would be liable to pay, or we would need to amend our buyer's agency agreement. I don't think you need to do all new ones, but I probably would go through and make sure you understand and your buyers clearly understand how that contract looks when we change this.
What's the big change with the sellers?
So the sellers, the biggest change for the sellers is that they need to find a way to let buyers agents know how much they're going to offer for a co-op. And so the sellers don't have a big change. They could say, yes, I want to make sure everybody has a buyer's agency agreement before they tour my home. I don't think we're going to see that happen. I don't really see where the huge benefit is. I don't think we're going to have a huge effect to sellers. Listing agents that want to like have transaction brokerages, they will have some changes they have to make sure that they understand how to have compensation from that. So the listing agreements will need to be clear to say, if I sell your house, this is how much I'm going to charge you, and this is how much I'm going to pay as a co-op. If I find a buyer for your house, I either am or am not allowed to transition into a transaction broker, or I'll keep you as my client and keep that buyer as a customer. And that needs to be spelled out clearly how that will go. That's how it is anyways, right? Yeah. Yes?
I've got two things. I've never said buyer must pay, and I know that there's a majority of agents that I've worked with in this office that do that as well. We go on the honor system and everything is kumbaya. So I think that we are going to need some kind of education, not necessarily from you with me, because you're the contract side of things, but from someone on how we navigate that conversation. Because I think this was the biggest concern that agents had when this first surfaced, is how do we explain to our buyers that are FHA buyers or that are coupled to a loan that you have to bring an extra $15,000 to the table.
Right.
And so that's my concern.
You're right. There is going to need to be some scripting, and we can get into some of those nuances too of who this really may affect most. And it's going to be our first time buyers and our FHA and VA buyers. And we will have more education surrounding that.
Do you think it's necessary for us to have this conversation with our buyers right now? Or do we sign a buyer agency like we've been doing without everybody panicking, because not much is changing? And if we get to that August 17th deadline and we haven't found a property for our buyers yet, do we then have to readdress that conversation?
I think what we need to do is figure out where we will find this offer of compensation and make sure that we understand with our buyers. We might see houses that have this, or this offered. In the event that it does not match what our buyer's agency agreement says, we either need to decide to change that, or we need to adjust the amount that we'll receive.
Does she not have she does not have the right, from what I recall from our session with Damien, to write in an offer of compensation into her offer if she has buyer makers?
So that is correct. So that is correct. If you say on your buyer agency agreement, again, I don't want to get too in the weeds with technical contract stuff, but if you say buyer may pay or buyer will pay, it says buyer will pay, will be obligated to pay, then you are able to ask for compensation within the contract to buy and sell. Here's where I feel like we may get a little bit technical, is that contract to buy and sell is changing, and there'll be an offer of compensation agreement written right into it. So it's going to have buyer and seller agree, buyer's agent will be paid this, and who's paying it. It'll say it right there in the contract to buy and sell now. So I'll need to clarify if that still is going to be the case. Okay.
There's a few questions in the chat box.
Sure.
Now.
Yes.
I'll try to speak loudly so everyone on Zoom can hear. First one is from Kenna. Can we still request a range of 2.5 to like 3%?
Nope.
We never could previous.
It's technically an option in the contract. It is hypothetically speaking.
Must be a
minimum.
specific number.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so if you have a specific, currently as it stands, if you have a specific number at the top range, it's not like whatever you want, my dude, then that's fine up until this point. If your minimum is X, then up to X as offered by listing brokerage firm and or seller. Right, as long as
Can you
it's
not hear?
specified percentage at the top.
Yeah, Whitney, we can't hear them,
Okay.
and we also need to, when you post the question, like, we can't hear Meg, so you need to restate
Okay.
the question so everyone on Zoom can hear, please.
Okay, Kenna's question, I think you guys know what it was in the chat box, is can it be a range? Let's say 2.5 to 2.8 in the buyer agency agreement, and the answer is no. We were just, Emma was doing some clarifying on that. But the answer is no. It has to be a specific number stated. And we'll get some more education surrounding that.
Okay, the next one is, do we have to provide proof of agency before touring homes?
Do we have to provide proof of agency before touring homes? So there's just gonna have to be proof of an agreement and how much you're gonna work for. It doesn't have to be an agency agreement. We're gonna have another form that will allow that to happen, but agency agreement would be best. That, yes, that will have to be in place before we tour a home.
So you still are.
What is the best verbiage to someone who is refusing to sign?
What is the best verbiage for someone who's refusing to sign? I think you're great. I cannot show you a house today. You can call my friend Brendan, and he's really persuasive. Yes.
Cheryl's asking which contracts will be changing.
Which contracts will be changing? I would say all of them, but don't freak out. It's minimal, like changing a word, commission to compensation. It's like changing minimal things as far as that goes. And I'll go through them here just in a second. There's going to be some additions made that will put these amounts that we work for right in these forms and teach us how that we can get them done easily before we go show.
iPhone 113 was the broker, sorry, we're chatting. So was the broker disclosure of buyer that was suggested to be laminated for open houses in the buyer agreement? I bring an example to my open house. I think they're maybe asking about what comment to bring and provide open houses.
Okay, so I think that I said, bring the buyer brokerage disclosure to buyer to an open house. I say laminate them, put them in every open house, take a picture of them on the counter. You've got proof that it was there. Mark customer, bring a little, the vis-a-vis markers and just say customer. You can have people sign them if you want, but nobody's gonna want to do that. You could use it as your sign-in sheet. But if you also need to, the question was, okay, if we have that, what other contracts could we have? If you want to have a buyer agency agreement there, great. If you want to have your computer with your CTM there, that you could create a buyer's agency agreement right there, amazing. Then hold every open house. If you're great at that conversion, bring your computer, do that buyer's agency and say, yeah, the place down the street is for sale. Let's go see 123 Sesame Street, right? Just for that house, get them out there. So yes, you can do that. They are separate contracts from one another.
My comment would be, your lead is perfect, and every buyer or seller that you talk to, having this down, if you don't have the verbiage to why they should be signing must pay, that's a role play item that you need to have mastered.
Exactly.
It gives you leverage.
Let me
with
repeat
every
that.
buyer and every seller.
I think that
Yeah.
the questions aren't dissimilar, and I think that the answer to this is that we have an expert in our brokerage that's really good at scripting, and so we'll actually say, hey, here's the scripts that we need to be building into role play and to all these things to be able to say, you have got to be able to clearly communicate your value quickly so that you can get them signing something to be able to go show a home. So we're gonna have to change some of those scripts a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to your point, James, the word obligated doesn't mean do not have to. So the one word says buyer must, and the other word doesn't say buyer must not. And so obligated means that the buyer has a choice, and that's where the conversation comes in.
I don't
So-
want to get in,
I agree.
we're close on time and I don't want to get in the weeds of technicalities of that. We'll make sure we do that in the contract.
But I did want to say that Damien said something that was really good. A lot of us in this room are listing agents, and this is not a conversation to have with your buyer's agent only. Educate the seller on how this works. And Damien said something with me that I thought was mind blowing for me, is that realtors in the past would say to the seller, you have to pay the buyer's agent because the buyer's agent will not bring their buyers to your house. And that is incorrect. Why we should encourage our sellers to pay the buyer's agent a fair compensation is because the buyer is unable to really bring that massive amount of money with a down deposit and pay their realtor. So it's going to attract more buyers because you're freeing up money for them. So that is a good switch on that.
And then again, just one last one. So Laura's asking, what are the repercussions, if any, for buyers who sign multiple agency agreements with multiple brokers?
What are the
Or an
repercussions? Oh,
agreement,
go ahead.
with me, but walk into an open house and write with an agent who's seen that open house for that property.
Okay, so the question is, what if a buyer signs multiple agreements with multiple agents? So it will depend on what they sign. If they have a buyer agency agreement and what the terms of that are, is it for a house? Is it for a day? If they have an agency agreement with another agent, It asks on the next time on that contract, it says right down there, are you in an agency agreement with another agent? And you all should be asking that question of them. Have you signed a buyer's agency agreement with anybody else? That is different though than signing the brokerage disclosure to buyer or looking at that saying I'm a customer until we go, and we will have an agency agreement in the future. Right now I'm a customer and I understand that. And that is perfectly fine. And it depends on the nature of the agreement as well. I think we're gonna see more agreements that aren't just starting January 1st and ending June 31st, 30th. I don't think we're gonna see that as often anymore as the terms of the agreement. I think it's gonna be a little bit different and that's good. You're gonna gain some great education surrounding that.
Whitney, could you tie into the importance of why to have a buyer consultation?
That's not my department to be an expert. I mean, so that's a Brandon
Yes,
question,
no.
but, oh yeah. I mean, I can answer the question, but I won't answer it as well as a coach or
Yeah.
somebody.
So
That's fantastic.
it really is just about, first of all, you wanna build trust with the client. You don't have to have a signed agency agreement to take a meeting, right? So you are dedicating your time to them for free off the bat and start thinking about it like that. And then it's an educational conversation and it's meaningful, not just if they're a first time home buyer, right? So you're proving your value in that consultation. And then you end the conversation by saying, okay, so here's the thing is that I like to make sure that my clients make the concerted decision to hire me. And it's not something you just fall into. So after this, I'm gonna go ahead and send you my buyer's agency agreement. In there, it specifies how I get paid. My minimum fee is X%. In the event that we go see a property and they are not offering that minimum fee, we can either choose to move forward with that property and you can absorb the difference in that fee, or we can choose to move on to a different property and that's totally up to you. But it is my job to protect your money and ultimately that remains consistent throughout the entire time.
Right.
So you're gonna know what you owe in the event we have to have that conversation.
I think that's what y'all, if you're not in coaching or you're not on a team that's spreading coaching, these are the scripting that you guys are gonna need to make sure that you have and that you're a really high level expertise with. You have to have it or you can't go show them a house, which is the whole thing.
But it is so much easier to have that conversation then after you've proven your value by educating them than like off the bat when you go see a house.
Right.
One last one.
Okay.
Will the seller contract changes have the seller definitely determine buyer compensation or just indicate it will be negotiated offer by offer?
I don't believe that it will be changed. The question was, will the listing contract state that the buyer's agreement or the buyer's compensation will be negotiated offer by offer, or will it still state a specific number? I believe it will still state a specific number. I hope it states that. It should state that so that we have a guideline of where we need to figure out where this offer of compensation is going to land at, and I have some ideas for that. I'm going to fly through these other contracts really fast. It's actually super easy. Okay, exclusive right to buy, right? You can just, I mean, you can see the red is very, there's not much. So it's fully negotiable, was changed out from a bunch of things, extra words that didn't need to be there. So keep going. You fly all the way down. So look, this isn't major changes, right? This is not the final edit, but we don't have major changes happening here. Compensation for the brokerage firm, we're going to define, or should have been there anyways. Keep going. Okay, this is gonna, listing brokerage firm may pay or seller buyer is obligated to pay. This is the language we're talking about. It's just gonna tighten up that language for us. Keep going. There you go. That's the buyer's agency agreement, okay? So I'm gonna skip over the rest of them except for contract to buy and sell. We'll go to that one really quickly. The exclusive right to sell is about the same. Contract to buy and sell has an addition that I want you guys to see. Again, this is not how it's gonna look. Here we go. So, oh wait, is this the contract to buy and sell?
That's the right to sell.
No, I wanna do the contract to buy and sell.
Yes, I'm showing it.
Okay, thank you.
It's 61 pages.
No one ever said I was patient. They call it a lot of things. That's not one of them. Actually, okay, so we'll do this one next. This is gonna be a whole new form here. You guys, we already have this form in our CTM. This is gonna look different. Buyer broker's compensation agreement. This is gonna be the compensation agreement between buyer broker and listing broker. If you don't want to put it in the contract and you want to say, hi, what compensation are you offering on 123 Sesame Street? They can say, actually, I'll send this over to you and you can sign it right there and it's done. It doesn't have to live in the contract. It doesn't have to, this will take care of that, okay? So it's a new form, yeah.
Can you put that in the MLS in the docs?
You cannot put it in MLS. It cannot live in MLS. When we're done, I'll talk about where I think the compensation offers will live, yeah. So this actually is already in CTM for you guys. And this is, let's say if you use these already. You use these if you go to Richmond Homes and you work with the new builder. You use these already. So this is something we already have. Go ahead. Contract to buy and sell. This is the contract that we live on, right? So you can scroll down till you see the one paragraph of all the rest. Oh, well, there's more on this one. All right. This actually has to do with fixing things on solar panels, which needed to be fixed anyways. If you know me, you know. Keep going. It's like, there's a lot of red that isn't relevant to this. Okay. Keep going. I think it might be the last paragraph. These are the fun meetings we get to sit in with Damien where sorry, I love Damien, but he loves to talk. So drones on forever and ever and ever about line 45 of the contract. Okay. All right, they'll be, keep going. Okay, here it is. 29, last, right before additional provisions, we'll have a whole new field in our contract to buy and sell. I'm not gonna read this to you because I don't know if that's what it's gonna say. It will say, seller and buyer agree that buyer's agent shall be compensated in the following ways. And the amount, it's what it's gonna say. It's exactly what we have anyways. So it will live here. It'll say buyer's agent shall be paid X amount by listing brokerage at the time of closing, or buyer's agent will be paid X amount by buyer at the time of closing, or buyer's agent will be paid X amount by seller at the time of closing. That's what it'll say. Huh?
It's above the line.
Yep, it's above the line in the actual contract.
In every single contract.
In every single contract to buy and sell. So it can be in there, it doesn't have to be in there. But this gives us a place that it can live there now without it being, getting in trouble or having to have the right verbiage. Okay?
Then I was curious how this affects any amendments that may change the price of the home. Like if you change price of the home and it's 2.8% or things like that.
You can change do an amend. The ways that I see an amend being used to change the contract and affecting this would be, let's say that you're using concessions to pay part of the buyer's agent commission. And then you have a inspection item that comes up that now the buyer needs all this money for their concession instead of for your commission. We're going to see some lending changes that may allow for this, but that's where I see that an amend may come in and say buyer's agent commission shall be changed to XXX. And then you would need to change your exclusive right to buy listing contract as well. There's many ways it probably could happen. I'm trying to think of the most common scenario we probably would see it happen.
And then when we have all these finalized red line contracts, those will be shared out.
When we have red line, we will share the red line version, and then we will offer a red line class that does a deep dive on the changes and how to adjust. Okay. I think that's pretty much the last of them. Is there another one in there, Brett? What's important to Brett? Too many Brett things I've done. Yeah, the rest are commercial. Okay, so that's pretty much it as far as the contracts go. It's not going to be super overwhelming. Here's the places and spaces that I think the offers of compensation are going to live. They're going to be calling an agent and saying, I'm going to show this property. Can you tell me how much the offer of compensation is? And they'll tell you if they answer their phone, right? So it may live in an email. It may live on their voicemail. We have had some discussion about maybe making a brokerage, like on our website, like a little database that someone who's smarter than I would could come up with. It just says, put in the address, and it'll say right there on our website. I think if we have a showing service that is not owned by our MLS, it could be in showing instructions. There's all sorts of places that it could live, but it's not that it's going away. The other thing is you're going to have the questions of how much is the seller offering? And then you have to go back to your buyer and you have to easily communicate, this is how much they're offering. everyone always says, I worked in a different format of real estate for a while, and it changed my mind of the concept of the buyers never pay the commission and the sellers always pay it. I don't think that's the case at all, because at the end of the day, the buyers are paying $525 for the house, and that amount is in there. So this will just give us some leverage and negotiating power to have everybody understand, buyer, if you're upping that price to pay for the commission, they were anyways. If they were going to be in a competing offer situation, that's when we're really going to see it come out. And you're going to have to be really, really expert level of saying, I will make an offer on this house. My compensation is this much, and they're only offering this much. We can ask them to change it. We can talk about this, but you may have another agent that's going to come in right next to you and say, we'll take that and I'll work for that. And you need to make sure your buyer understands the ramifications that they may have in that. So we're gonna have some awkward conversations. We'll figure out how to get it scripted, but the reality is it's only awkward until it's normal. And once it's normal, and this is routine then. So, yeah. Emma?
Also, if you're working with a buyer who's never themselves lived or like have the lived experience of purchasing a property, it is normal to them. And don't make it weird. They don't know anything else. You know,
That's a good point. She said it also, if someone doesn't know how this works anyways, it isn't weird. So we don't have to act like it's weird. We can just go right into it. And Hannah?
Oh, I was gonna ask something.
Oh.
Do you have any information about like when we would potentially see changes in like lending products?
And the question is, when will we see changes in lending products? I think that we will see them within a few months. I think they're already in motion. Yeah.
Here, I'll ask this as a question because I think it's important. Can an agent get paid more on a transaction than the amount stated in their buyer agency?
No.
Why not?
Can an agent, it says specifically that as one of the,
Yes.
the provisions in this is that you may not be paid more than it states in your buyer's agency agreement. You could amend your buyer's agency agreement. I'm not saying that, I think the rule is I think you should pick what you're going to work for and work for that amount and be okay with it. Saying that's how much I said I would work for and I'm okay with that. Yes.
How do we protect ourselves, hypothetically speaking, if I take a buyer in Castle Rock, for instance, I live in the central Denver. The juice is worth the squeeze for me to drive to Castle Rock if I'm charging X.X%, right? But then everyone in central Denver, I charge X%. Should I have something in writing, like in my marketing collateral, that I charge X per like radius outside of Denver to
Sure.
protect myself?
Again,
from
that's
certain clients more than others,
Yeah,
Sure.
can you
A new way
repeat
to
that so
write
we
your
can
buyer's
hear it?
agency agreement could say, my compensation
Whitney,
is this
Whitney,
much.
Whitney, can you repeat that so we can all hear it? We can't hear it.
I am
what you
repeating
said.
it in my answer. So I was
Thank
just, I agree.
Getting a microphone for the next meeting.
I could also just see that becoming like a fair housing.
Well, let me make sure they can get up to speed. So what a tool you may have to use is if I live in Denver and that's my area, I'm gonna work for this much in Denver. But if you want to go look at houses in Castle Rock or in, Thornton or Broomfield or Conifer or wherever, this is the amount that I will be paid. And that is perfectly acceptable to write in your contract, to say, this is what I'll be paid in this area. And if it goes outside of that area, this is another amount. We're going to have to get creative.
Based on like maybe charge a flat fee under a certain price point or X, Y, and Z. I do think that sometimes I foresee the need of getting into a sticky situation where like I told someone I do it for this, I told someone else I do it for this. Person A and person B know each other and they're like, what the heck, I'm gonna charge me this for this, and then all of a sudden it's a bad day for them.
I think another question that will be similar is, what if I have two buyers that are writing offers on the same house and I'm working for different amounts with each one of those buyers?
That's scary.
Well, I don't know why that's scary. That's just basic compensation.
I understand that, but like, it
Negotiations.
just, you have to think about these things.
If you're saying I'm working for John for X%, and I'm working for Thomas for Y%, and now John and Thomas both want to offer on the same house, and I innately know we deal with this already all the time. This is when you call one of us and we can help you navigate it. But just you're gonna have to understand how your compensation affects your transactions, your scripting, and your plans and methods.
So Whitney, what if I decide to show a house or several houses without an agency agreement? What's the risk? What happens to me? Do I go to jail? Do I get penalized? What happens?
I'm so surprised at you asking this question. Brendan would like to know, what if you break the rules? What happens? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that right now. I don't think that we have any clear answer to that right now. Again, I want you all to keep in mind, not that I want you to break the rules. I want you to keep in mind who the governing body of this rule is. It's the National Association of Realtors. It is not the state of Colorado. Just keep that in mind.
So we can do whatever we want.
I'm announcing in next week's meeting, Brendan Bartik will then be the managing broker for your and you then can do whatever you want. So, yes.
Should we be specifying referral agreements, what percentage the referral percentage? Like the compensate, like I will, if I send a referral to someone in Florida, you're gonna pay me out 25% of gross commission earned on 2.8% of the purchase price.
That's a good question. The question is, if we have a referral fee, then should we specify both the referral amount and the amount that you expect to be paid on, a percentage or flat fee that you expect to be paid on? Probably, maybe it'd be good to talk to that person and say, what will your buyer agency agreement look like here? And so I can know how much of that to expect and write it in. Yes.
Say I'm working an open house for Kazan, and she's offering on her listing a certain percentage, and someone shows up with their broker. The broker asks me, what is the listing agent offering? And I tell them the number. First of all, can I tell them the number? Second of all, is that binding, legally binding because I spoke it?
The question is, if one agent holds an open house for another agent in our office and someone comes in and asks for the compensation amount at the open house, would it be binding if that amount was given by someone other than the listing agent? I think that you need to understand the amounts that we're giving the right amount, but the answer is no, unless it's in writing. The technical answer is no. I don't want to go to court over this, but no, I think that it's this, you should check with the listing agent, or you should know it and you should make sure that you're communicating it accurately. Or you may take it with you to the open house and just have a little broker commission agreement there at the open house. It says it right there. You've got the form right there to say, this house is offering this. You could laminate that, put it on the counter, write that in with a little piece of these. Okay, one more question and then we'll get going. No, you're good.
If we do that, can we just do that for our listings and have like a sign there that just?
100%. You guys can post it on the door if you want. You can post it right on the door. You can post it inside the house. You can put it in your flyer. You can put it in your pamphlet. You can put it in your online marketing. You can put it on your website. You can put it anywhere except for the MLS. Yeah, so I mean, that may not be what we get away from. If you're showing a house, maybe we have right there next to the lead-based paint, don't burn down your house pamphlets. This is the compensation.
I have a question that you may need to ask Damien. The way I understood it is they dumped it on the MLSs. The MLSs are the ones who are going to be policing this, not the NAR.
No, they said yesterday. I'm sorry.
I don't know the answer to that, and
You
our
remember
MLS
when-
has its
you
own
remember
issues
when
right
that
now,
was
so.
When that was the statement.
I don't know the answer to that. Is who's policing this? Is it NAR or the local MLSs? I believe that it will be from a local level, is where we'll see the enforcement. It's the same thing when we had clear cooperation, when they said you can't, what is clear cooperation? It's that you can't, what is it? Why am I slipping my mind? What's that? Oh yeah, you can't show a house unless it's in active status and coming soon, where we saw a big fuss about it. You know who the only people that complain about these things are? Other agents.
Yes.
Nobody else cares. So it was on the local agencies to enforce, and I think they've gotten tired of it. So we don't see enforcement as often. Okay, back to Patrick. You guys, thank you so much, and call me with questions. I only know what I know on this. We'll know more soon, and we'll do a full red line class. Really thrilling material.
Let's give it up for Whitney.